Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're back on the 71 Camaro. We're going to be inside the car focusing on the shift boot ring area of the transmission tunnel. I want to put some plate steel around that area so that I have a nice base to tap and put bolts into to hold that stuff all down. I also want to level it out a little bit to give myself a little more room in there. So let me take you inside the car and show you what we're going to do. So I'm inside the 1971 Camaro looking at the custom transmission tunnel that I fabbed up here around the T56. And we have our hole cut out around the shifter here. What I'm focusing on today is welding in some plate steel around this area here to give myself a nice base to tap for bolts to hold the outer shift boot rings in place. There's other options you can use here. You can drive sheet metal screws right through the outer rings and hold all that stuff together. You could also use rib nuts around here. I'm looking for more of a finished look in here and just want to do some fabrication, I guess. So what I'm going to do is take some 3/16 inch plate steel and I'm going to cut a ring out that's about the same size as this. And then I'm going to come off this area here and go level right across, and then we'll fill in the gaps around there. The first step's going to be to get that first plate in there. We'll call it the tap plate. So essentially we'll get that steel plate in there and weld it in, and we'll get the holes drilled and tapped. And I have this Billet Specialties Shift Ring. It would be an outer ring, of course. I don't think it's going to be big enough to use, but the goal is to see if we can make it work. I'm going to focus on getting that shift ring cut out first. I need to make sure that I have enough room around here. This shifter comes up through the floor, so it has to have enough clearance around here to account for any kind of movement that might happen with the transmission. So you can get an idea here as to how much this thing comes out of the floor. And again, what I'm going to do is take this plate and come straight across here like this, and then we'll fill in the gaps. And then that'll allow me to get a little tighter to this thing. I want to stay above the shift plate here, but I also want to make sure that I have access to the bolts and everything. So the plan is to just take this shifter here and get the length and width of it and add a 1/2 inch to each of those measurements. And then that'll give me a 1/4 inch basically all the way around of space if I were to put it right up against this. But again, we'll be up higher, so it's not gonna be that big of a deal. In case you're wondering why there's like more gap on this side than this side, it's because a lot of these aftermarket shifters for these T56s, they come out and they have an extra little bit of width over here. And I think that's just to make it all centered. The shifter mounting location here is sort of off center from the rest of the transmission. At least that's what it looks like to me. So if you look into here and you look down, straight down, you'll see that the shifter mounting piece is not centered with the actual output shaft of the transmission down there. So what I think they're doing here is taking advantage of a little more material and then also giving you a shifter that's pretty much centered with your drive shaft. Now for these Camaros, at least the way mine is and what I read online, my whole drive line is offset to the passenger side by 1 inch. So it's not going to be perfectly centered, and neither is the plate that's going to be in here. It's not going to be perfectly centered. So it's going to be over just a little bit, but that's how it goes. All right, guys, so let's take some measurements of this shifter and get it transferred over to our plate steel. So we got 3.5 inches wide by 5 3/4 inches long. So we're going to add 1/2 inch to each of those measurements, and we're going to transfer that over to our plate steel. All right, guys, small change in plans here. I really like this shifter ring, so I'm gonna make a plate that fits it exactly. And because the whole thing's coming up, it's not gonna be in line with this piece here, so I don't have to worry about hitting this. The only thing I have to worry about is this, and this is wide enough here. And I'll still have enough clearance to get the bolts out. And worst case, with that Speed Tech cross member, I can always just unbolt it in the middle and drop the transmission down, take the bolts out, and put it back in. So it's not gonna be a big deal. So I'm gonna go ahead and trace this out pretty much as it is, and then what I'm going to do is adjust the measurements a little bit so that these bolts aren't on the ends of the plate and that they're more centered on the plate. And I'm thinking I'm going to give myself an extra 1/8 inch clearance on the inside here as well. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, guys, so a couple iterations, and this is where I ended up. So this is essentially a mirror of the Billet Specialties Shifter Ring, and then I just created an even spacing all the way around, so that's what the plate's gonna look like. I was going to bring this in an 1/8 inch to give me space, mainly up here where the bolts are for the shifters, so on either end. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave that, and I'm just gonna cut out like half circles in the areas where those bolts are, big enough so that I can get a socket down in there to get those out. The shifter will come out no problem, so I ain't worried about that. That'll make sure that I have a nice tight seal all the way around with this shifter ring when it pushes everything down. So that's what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna go ahead and just cut out the middle right now, transfer that over to sheet metal, get that cut out, and then we'll cut out the rest of the template. All right, guys, so we got the template transferred over to the steel, so it's time to cut it out. I'm gonna be using my Jegs plasma cutter here. Third time I've ever used it, so we'll see how it goes. I think I'm just gonna keep it close to the line and then use the grinding wheel to clean things up. So let's get to it. All right, here's a look after the plasma cutter, a little rough. Not that good with it yet. Because these aren't perfectly straight, I didn't use a straight edge. I did use it out here a little bit after I started. I tried using this adapter on the end of the plasma cutter to kind of keep the tip off of the metal, but it didn't stay on right. I don't think it fits right. I don't think it's the right size or something. It doesn't, I can't, if I push it up to where it's snug, then the tip is too long and it hits the metal. So anyway, I ditched that and went on my way. So I got a lot of cleanup to do. I'm not sure if cutoff wheel would be better or not. So let me just grab the 4.5 inch angle grinder, start trimming this stuff down to the lines, see how good we can get it. All right, guys, so we got the piece cut out, and what I did is clamped this shifter ring to the piece. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take this transfer punch and mark the holes that I need to drill for the bolts that came with the shifter plate here. The way that these transfer punches work is you find the one that matches the hole size. So right here, that fits in there nice and snug. And then what you do is you put it in there, and then you tap it with the hammer. You don't hit it too hard. Use a center punch for that. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. Here's a set of transfer punches. I'll put a link in the description to this same set. It's been working pretty good for me. So again, just put that in there and then tap it. That'll leave a mark, and then come back with your center punch. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So in order to make sure all these line up pretty good, I'm gonna just start with the 4 corners, get those marked, drilled, and tapped, and then get the hardware installed, and then I'll come back and do these 4 pieces here. All right, guys, so now I'm over here at the vise, and I'm gonna go ahead and use the center punch to put some really good marks in there for the drill bit. Get yourself a nice little set of center punches. Change the plans a little bit. I'm just gonna do these 2 corners first, get those secured, and then come back and do these 2 corners, same thing, and then do the other ones. Mostly because I don't do this often, so I wanna make sure that this thing doesn't move on me, and I wanna make sure those holes line up good the whole way through. All right, so there we go. We got a mark for the drill bit. Now I just have to figure out what size hole I need to drill here for the hardware that they sent with the shifter ring. All right, guys, so here's the bolt that came with the shifter ring. In order to find the right tap, we're just going to take this gauge that comes with the kit and we're going to find the right one. In this case, it's 0.80. So now what I'm going to do is find the matching tap, and then we'll figure out what drill bit size we need and we'll go from there. All right guys, so in order to find the right tap, I then go find the die that the bolt will thread into. And in this case, this one here works pretty well. So what we have here is a 5mm by 80. So we're going to go ahead and get the tap for that and then figure out what drill bit we need to use. All right guys, so we're going to come in here. In this kit, the drill bit sizes are listed on the lid. So we're going to come down here and find 5mm by 80. And then we're going to see the metric size is 4.2 and the standard drill bit size is 19. So I don't know what size number 19 is. So what I did is I went online and just figured out the closest size. And in my case, and you can see here, we got 4mm, 4.1, 4.2, and that is 532. So that is the drill bit size that I'm going to try. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the scrap piece that I cut out of the middle of that shifter ring, and I'm going to just drill a hole through it with 532 and see if I can tap that and get that bolt in there. So let's go ahead and do that. All right guys, so the 5/32 drill bit worked for the 5x80 tap, so we're good to go. I'm going to go ahead and drill out 2 holes on the plate and get those tapped and ready to go. All right guys, so we got 2 bolts in. That went pretty smooth, so I'm going to go ahead and mark the rest of the holes, and I'm going to drill them all out, tap them all, come back and see how we did. All right guys, so most of the holes lined up. These 3 did not. This one's pretty close over here, but these 2 are off. So I don't know if it moved when I was marking it or what, but that's the great thing about metal. I'm just gonna weld these shut and drill new holes and tap them again. So let's go ahead and do that. All right guys, so I got these welded, drilled, and tapped again. I think the mistake that I made was that I might have flipped this over and put my shifter plate on top of there. And the reason that was a mistake is because I didn't use a drill press, and I noticed some of these went in at an angle. So if I would have flipped this over and put some of those in, it would have definitely messed up some of these. So that's what I'm thinking. Or I just messed up the holes, one or the other. Definitely need to get a drill press. It would make this a lot easier, and these things would have been a lot straighter. So anyway, let's go ahead and try this out and see if attempt number 2 is a success. And just so I don't flip it over on the wrong side again, I labeled this top. All right guys, so after a little bit of work, I got these 3 screws in. These 2 on the ends went in perfect, no issues. This one was off a little bit again, so I didn't have to re-drill it. I was able to get it in there. I just ran the tab down through and got it, I guess. I probably shaved a little bit off the shifter ring there a little bit, but anyway, it went in. It was tight. The whole thing's kind of tight on here, so the bolts don't fit perfectly. I'm not sure how I was off on this one again. I'm not sure if the drill bit was walking on me or if the transfer punch wasn't perfectly centered. Just not sure. I mean, it's possible the transfer punch wasn't perfectly centered. I noticed like these are pretty shallow, so when I put the punch in there, it's just barely touching the edges of it. So you kind of have to line it up and take a guess there. I think the biggest issue with all of this was probably the fact that I didn't use a drill press. So my holes as I was going were somewhere at an angle, some probably moved around a little bit. So I'm gonna do this again, and I'm gonna use a drill press this time around. So we'll call this round good practice. So it's actually been a few days since I last put these couple screws in and got them all snug in there and fit. And I had some time to think about this thing, and I decided that I'm not going to use this shifter ring. It's a really nice piece. It's machined very well. It's high quality for sure. But the thing that's driving me nuts about it is that it's not a perfect rectangle. It comes out this way a little bit and then same thing around. So this plate that I'm trying to make and weld into my car is not going to be perfectly rectangular, and that's going to make it odd to weld. And also when I have to bring the carpet and everything up around it, it's just going to look odd. So you can see here, like, we have more space around this one than we do here, because that's trying to keep this plate from really bowing out on the sides, if that makes sense. So I've decided to scrap this shifter ring here and this plate too. I'm going to make another one. So after I got this piece done, when I realized I didn't like it, I ordered this piece here. So this is a low-car shifter ring. I'm pretty sure this is a black anodized aluminum piece as well. I'm not 100% sure on that. It might be steel. But anyway, it's perfectly rectangular, which is going to make the plate that I'm going to weld into the shifter tunnel really nice and even, and it's going to weld up and look pretty good in the car. This shifter ring came with screws that I'm not going to use. I'm going to swap those out for some black machine screws like this piece over here used. I'd use these, but I can't because they're not flush mount. This shifter ring requires flush mount. This ring looks to be about 5/8 the whole way around, which is nice. It's a little bit thinner overall than this. And because it's the same dimensions the whole way around, and it's, we'll call it perfectly rectangular, this plate here is going to be a nice size all the way around, which is going to make it nice and easy to weld into the Camaro. All right, guys, so we're going to cut it here for this one. I will jump onto the low car shifter ring and kind of do this whole thing over again in the next video, and then hopefully that all goes well, and we'll also weld it into the car in that same video. So I'm throwing this one out for you guys so you guys can take a look at everything I did and maybe give me some pointers on how I can get those holes lined up better next time. Maybe where I went wrong with some of the stuff getting that lined up. I thought I had it figured out, but I'm not 100% sure what went wrong there. Again, I have some ideas, but we'll have to wait until next time to try that out. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.